Alright, this is going to be... I usually do one of these preliminary videos when I'm about halfway done with the character and I'm not quite ready to fully show it off yet. But at the same time, this being a hardcore character who is currently live at level 80, I don't necessarily want to wait forever until I start doing the harder maps to show off the build's full potential, or some fraction of it. I shouldn't be picking things up, I always do that. Anyways, this is my Stormburst Trickster. I really shouldn't do that. It's been quite a while since I've done a build video, obviously. This is my Stormburst Trickster.
Just in time.
Oh boy.
Ah, there you are. Ready to revisit the
Oh,
past?
great.
It's time.
And it's a pretty insane character. I should I should also turn the screen shake off. Just had half my potential audience immediately close the video because of the screen shake, huh? But when the crits are that good, how can you turn screen shake off? Is that it? Oh. Oh, it finishes my temple up nicely.
Good job, excellent.
Okay, here we are.
It's okay.
Pretty decent drops. Oh, it looks like I'm level 81, too. So this is, as I kind of slightly showed off at the beginning, this is an Alkengo Tier 5 map. I don't really have anything higher than Tier 5 right now. Hell, I barely have a T5. However, I can say that just earlier today, Chris Wilson confirmed on Reddit that he would bug the live team into looking into map drops, because apparently nobody in the world can sustain maps. Not me though, because I've just dropped 2 Tier 6s. My first Tier 6s of the league.
Just need a moment.
So that's cool. Level 80
Just in time.
and only barely breaching yellow maps. I really thought about buying like a Tier 8 just to do this video,
Ah,
but
there you
decided
are. Ready
to play it
revisit the
safe,
past?
seeing as the whole point of this
The
video
more
is
you
to play
kill.
it safe.
It's time.
One quick thing first. Ooh, yeah. So I now have 7,000 ES. I have quite a few layers of defense going on. And so that 7,000 ES is multiplied a fair amount further. Not necessarily in the way of mitigation kinds of layers of defense, but this is a Trickster character, so I have some really incredible ways to sustain my ES. The Ascendancy itself gives some really crazy modifiers that give you a bunch of flat ES and give you a way to gain a bunch of ES whenever you're hit. And because I'm also an evasion character, I have a pretty low chance of being hit in the first place. So you can see me just blatantly face tanking. While this is low level, I'm still
Good job.
taking really big hits, and my life bar just doesn't budge at all.
We found a map.
A large deal of my mana regen actually isn't coming from regen itself. I am wearing a Divinarius melee weapon, and so I have a fair amount of mana gain on kill,
It's okay.
and that's what's keeping my mana topped up, actually, is all the mana gain on kill. In a controlled environment, just single target, I don't get a ton of mana I can sustain for about 10 seconds, but I'm somewhat reliant on Arcane Surge off of my Flame Dash in order to really actively regen mana quickly. I am using an Orb of Storms, which not only am I using as a curse on hit, but especially with the fresh buff to Orb of Storms, and with how incredibly high my cast speed is, you can see, the Orb of Storms does a fair chunk by itself. Oh, leaving my map open too much.
Farol, lend us your eyes, that we may see past
the Orb of Storms kills things.
hearts. Venomous, lend us your web, that we may bind our tribes together.
I'm not going to grab the last stabilizer. There's no point in grabbing these 2-door stabilizers. I only grabbed 3 and ups.
Just need a moment to catch my breath.
Whoa! Well, I'm trapped on a desert island. And the world is burning up around me. Let's see, 44 monsters left. Time to do the boss. There isn't one pack right here. Yeah, that's what I figured. Now it's time to do the boss. I missed an Alva, apparently. So yeah, solid sustain. And I have a bunch of ES Leech on top of that. This is a safe enough area, so I guess I'll do my gear rundown right here. Okay, I'll start with the Ascendancy. So this is a Trickster. So some of the most important build-defining features are Ghost Dance and Escape Artist. Ghost Dance says, every second you gain a Ghost Shroud up to a maximum of 3. Whenever you're hit, you lose a Ghost Shroud and instantly recover ES equal to a small portion of your evasion rating. Then Escape Artist gives you evasion rating per the amount of ES on your helmet, and ES per your evasion on your chest. I don't know about high levels of investment, but at budget levels, I've looked at the stuff available, and it seems that pretty definitively the way to go for maximum EHP is to go hybrid both chest, see it has both evasion and energy shield, and helmet. I don't know about high levels of investment. I'm sure at 30-40 chaos for some crazy CI helmet, you may get more evasion rating that way. But at least for what I have, I'm using hybrid stuff on the helmet and chest. And I'm using a lot of mostly CI style gear for the rest of my gear. You can see the bated breath. And so this kind of informs the most of the build, how it's a hybrid energy shield and evasion rating character. Whenever I get hit, I gain energy shield equal to 5% of my evasion rating. I have, where is it? 6,399 evasion rating. So unbuffed, I'll gain 320 ES anytime I'm hit. With flasks up, I'll gain 1,239 per hit instantly. So that mitigates a very large just number of hits outright. If it's anything but a big slam from a boss, I'm not only going to not take the damage, I may even heal off of the damage. And so I have a pretty good chance to evade even before flasks with this gear. So even without flasks, I have a very, very high chance of just not getting hit by those attacks in the first place. And the Ascendancy even grants a small amount of spell dodge. So the spells themselves, which are guaranteed to hit, unfortunately, aren't necessarily guaranteed to hit. The tree is relatively generic for what this kind of build is. I modeled it after, just PoE.ninja, search Stormburst, pull up the heat map, and then click whatever nodes look good. But what I like about the tree is that it's very, very node dense. I think the longest stretch between functional clusters is right here, and that's only 2 stat points. Everywhere else has something off of it. So with this tree, you can get a whole lot of power really, really node efficiently. And some of the more useful nodes are this, which gives me a bunch more stun resistance and cheaper channeling. And right here and here, I'm still working on this cluster. Really, really efficient, brand new casting while holding a shield nodes that make it really, really effective to use a one-handed weapon and a shield over using some crazy Shaper's staff. Which I understand a lot of people are still using on their Divine Ire builds to get away with cast when channeling. So the tree, I go physical damage, crit, 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 ES. Nothing is too crazy except for the focus on the shield nodes, which are just really, really efficient, and the cast when channeling. Alternatively, you can do this build as a occultist instead of a trickster, in which case you wouldn't take these fizz nodes. Everything else would be the same, but you'd potentially be able to track over here, get Zealot's Oath so you get regen, and move in through Faith and Steel with this ES nodes to pick up a lot more damage around here and with the lightning conversion nodes. So I think an occultist will have a lot more damage, although the occultist might not necessarily have as much incredible sustain as the trickster. And so another source of my sustain is I'm using a Shaper chest plate. The defensive stats on it aren't insanely good. I've obviously mastercrafted on additional stats to make it more in the way of a real CI chest. But the important part is that it recovers 6% of maximum ES on kill. So on kill, I gain 413 ES per kill instantly, which is a little bit better than the plus 10 life gained on kill from Divinarius. So that's a large majority of my sustain when I'm clearing, is I'll gain 400 ES just instantly as I'm clearing the pack. So over the course of a pack, you may very well get thousands and thousands of ES faster than they can damage you. Finally, when it comes to sustain, I am using Energy Leech support and its series Promise, and I have the Ghost Reaver Keystone. I have looked into taking the ES cluster here. I want to take the ES cluster here, but I just can't squeeze the points in quite so efficiently, especially considering my Leech seems to be good enough, and with how much instant sustain I get off my chest plate, why bother leeching? It's slow when I have pseudo Volpack. Although against a boss, it will certainly help me a lot. According to Path of Building, I get, where'd it go? Here, about 1,000-ish ES Leech on a single target, and that's heavily depending on, of course, on whether or not I crit and how many of my little Stormburst bubbles are hitting the boss all at once. But I have enough AoE that the majority of the balls do hit at once, so it may even be a little bit higher than this, because I can stack up a lot of instances of Leech really, really quickly. This DPS number, while good, isn't necessarily reflective of the real thing, because this is assuming 1 hit per cast, and not just that, but the patch notes even admit that Stormburst DPS calculation isn't exactly accurate. So, I usually napkin math at something like 1.5 times this, but in reality, if I have 9 to 10 bubbles all at once, I may be doing 5, 6, 7 times as much damage as the tooltip shows. So that's a lot. I have 7.5 casts per second, and it seems like cast speed is a very good scaler on this because of the mechanics of Stormburst. So, I'll explain those mechanics itself, I suppose. Stormburst, when you cast it, it creates one bubble. The bubble lasts for 1.2 seconds, and every 0.4 seconds, it dashes, and it does an explosion where it dashes to. So one bubble will burst 3 times with no further additional duration. And when you let go, they all explode, dealing damage based on how much duration they have left. I have this linked to Energy Leech support, of course, infused channeling, and physical to lightning. So I'm dealing pure lightning damage without using my 8 series promise. And all of that damage is being scaled by the infused channeling. All of it is being scaled by a curse on hit conductivity that I have. And I even get a little bit more damage off of Innervate linked to Orpus Storms. Altogether, that's how I hit that 85,000-ish DPS number. I'm using power charges, frenzy charges. I have a jewel that gets better when I kill recently. I'm almost guaranteed to be shocking because I have 50% crit chance. And yeah, this just turns on Energy Leech for the damage. If you wanted to Number Warrior, you could turn on Leeching Energy Shield instead of Full Energy Shield, in which case you'd get a little bit more from the Energy Leech support. As for the gear itself, obviously I'm using Divinarius as my weapon, and it's nice for the spell damage, it's very nice for the crit chance. The increased AoE is one of the main reasons why I'm using it, but to be honest, I think I'm using it just for the mana gain on kill at this point. At higher levels of investment, you see people using crazy multi-modded foils. Typically, they'll get one... they'll have a foil, it'll be like an Elder foil, they'll get some good spell damage mod on it, then they'll multi-mod it and put on damage added as Chaos, flat lightning damage, and possibly % increased spell damage onto it. I'm using a mediocre ES shield, a decent hybrid evasion rating and energy shield helmet, obviously the chest plate that I've already talked about, some CI gloves. These boots are mostly for resistances, to be honest. A Baited Breath. There's not much variance here when it comes to Baited Breath. It's a really good belt, so unless you have... until you're high enough level to put on a crystal belt with really good CI mods on it, you're pretty much going to be using Baited Breath. And then rings, they're CI rings. I tried to get both flat evasion rating and flat energy shield on them. And of course, diamond rings are going to help you quite a lot because of your good crit build. Stormburst does have 6% base crit chance. And same thing, look for some kind of CI amulet with % increase maximum ES on it. Flasks are typical evasion flasks, so a Surgeon's Stibnite of Heat, because I'm not wearing Dream Fragments, a Jade Flask of Reflexes, and a Staunching Flask. I'm thinking of possibly a Wise Oak, possibly a Vessel of Vinctar could be useful. I haven't even price checked a Vessel of Vinctar. God knows how much they are right now. And of course, at Series Promise, it seems to quote-unquote double dip. Both the gained physical damage and gain elemental damage both add as chaos damage. So when I chuck it, I go from 23,000 DPS to 29,000 DPS. A few hundred chaos damage added on per bubble can be quite helpful when it comes to DPS in the long run, not to mention how good the Leech is. For gems, I'm using Zealotry and Discipline. I'm using Zealotry and Discipline as my auras. But ideally, If you could find some way to reduce the mana reservation of Zealotry, or possibly look into a Circle of Anguish, I think it's the Herald of Ash ring, you would turn on Herald of Ash. Herald of Ash adds almost as much DPS as Zealotry, but obviously it's going to be fire damage, so I'm preferring to run Zealotry to keep it all pure lightning damage, because my 5th link is going to be probably lightning penetration. Anyways, Flame Dash linked to faster casting and Arcane Surge. They just recently upped the mana multiplier on Arcane Surge, so now with a level 7 Arcane Surge, you can turn it on every single cast at I think level 17 of Flame Dash. It's exactly 32 mana cost. Maybe it's level 16. But once you get Flame Dash high enough level, with this 3 link, you can have a level 7 Arcane Surge that turns on every single cast, whereas before I think you'd be limited to a level 6 Arcane Surge. So that may not be a nerf, maybe a buff. Thanks, GGG. I have Whirling Blades linked to faster attacks and Fortify, just to take advantage of the fact that I'm using a dagger. It isn't fantastic as a movement skill, obviously, compared to Flame Dash with all my cast speed, but Fortify. Enough said. I have my Orb of Storms linked to Conductivity, Curse on Hit, and Innervate support, as I mentioned briefly earlier. The Conductivity reduces lightning resistance by a massive, massive amount. The shock chance isn't so important as I'm critting, but this alone probably improves my DPS almost more than anything else on the build. And the Innervate support, it has such a high chance of killing things, just the Orb of Storms by itself, because of the high cast speed with Stormburst, that Innervate seems to almost always proc, and it adds about 75 flat lightning damage, or I'm sorry, that's the gem itself. It adds about 50 lightning damage to your Stormburst, even if you kill things with the Orb of Storms. So it's a little bit helpful. Some people run more duration or increased duration support linked to the Orb of Storms to get the Orb of Storms and the conductivity to last longer. But I'm liking Innervate. It adds a solid chunk of DPS. And then finally, a level 1 cast when damage taken support link to Immortal Call and Feeble. And right now I have it on a phase run because I'm too lazy to recolor these boots. But what I'm seeing people do is using a Wave of Conviction in that slot. Wave of Conviction is the brand new spell that applies exposure, reducing the resistance of enemies according to whatever the most damage Wave of Conviction does. So with how much increased lightning damage I have, Wave of Conviction, of course, would do lightning damage and apply 25% less lightning resistance to anybody that it hits. So it would be an extra little bit of a kind of a mini curse. And that's pretty much the character. You can grab almost... Oh, this is almost... I skipped over it because it's almost without saying, but Swift Killer is some insane DPS. If you're taking Trickster and you're not taking Swift Killer, you should just be playing a Cultist. There's no reason. And I suppose finally I would take Harness the Void, although Weave the Arcane is kind of an option if you're into that kind of thing, if you're into movement skills. And yeah, that's the character. I should work on my video endings.